Shri Guru Vaishnava Parampara ki jai.
Good evening. Welcome. Thank you for inviting me here. Same time. So we are here this evening, and with that, we have the opportunity to say something about, discuss about Shiva Thakur. Shiva Thakur ki jai. Today's his appearance day. I've never lectured on him or about him, but he's an important person to all of us, and we'll see what we can say in praise of him. And at this time, we'll entertain questions or comments from others. Fair enough?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. We'll stop with you, Jack. So, of course, we really know very little about all of the associates of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from a historical perspective. Indians are not well known for his history, as we know it today, recording it. They're more, it would seem, and have been inclined to just kind of try to describe the feelings of the times and details of the story fit around that. It's massaged to bring out those feelings. And that's certainly the case with the sacred texts that are of a poetic nature, like the Bhagavatam, which is itself, of course, it speaks in different voices. It said the Veda speaks with the voice of a king. Do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that. That sounds a little ominous, but there's a lot of affection behind it. So then if you go to the Puranas, which are supplementary literature, so they speak like a friend. So let's take a walk and tell a story and, relate something happened to me. And so it pertains to your situation, your dilemma, and so forth. So you share a story. And then the third voice comes in the kavya, or the poetic text, the ras, we call them scriptures, if you will. And this is the voice of a lover. So they said that the peculiar thing, interesting thing about the Bhagavatam, of course, is that it speaks in all those voices. It is Shruti Saram Ekam. Shruti means what the Veda means, the Upanishads, and so forth, which, as I said, is one voice. Short, like that, just do that when asking questions. So, Shruti Saram Ekam, it is the essence of the Shruti, the Saram. Saram is cream. Cream of the milk of the Vedas, or Saram also means essence. It is itself the essence of the scripture, of the Shruti. So it's a Purana, the Bible Purana, Srimad Bhagavatam, mentioned in other Puranas, glorified in other Puranas, described in other Puranas, and so forth, and very rich. The most rich in its language and its theology and philosophy, such that there's no comparison between the Puranas. And so many of them offer praise to the Bhagavad Purana. Jiva Goswami's collected those praises and cited those praises to help us focus on the Bhagavatam, which he sees as the central hub, if you will, around which the sacred text of the Hindus revolve, and in relation to which they're understood. We're going to give you context from there. While different Puranas, for example, are written with a view, compiled with a view to minister, if you will, to people who are prominently influenced by one mode of nature or another. The Bhagavatam has a different audience in mind. And therefore, it said, Dharma Projita Kaitavutra Paramu Nirmat Saranam Satam. Nirmat Saranam Satam. And Dharma Projita Kaitavutra. So it is not dealing with the modes of nature at all, which is the primary subject in one sense of the Vedas, because people are within the modes and they're interested in acquisition. So it tries to, the text tries to deal with the general trajectory of people, the motion and the momentum that's been driving them for eons and eons, coming into the human life now, try to harness them, capture them, and turn them in an entirely different direction from taking to giving. It's a big task. And so the texts want to work with you, so to speak. So there are such texts dealing with different modes of nature, but the Bhagavatam is dealing with the nirvana. So it's Paramhamsa Samhita. Yad Vaishnavanam Priyam. It's a text for the Paramhamsas. And of course, if we meet such people who are relishing it, it happens to be contagious. So it's very generous. We become involved in pursuing the ideal that it showcases. So it speaks like a friend and a king. So it's a Purana, and it's the essence of the Shruti. And in its own language, it's Nigamakaldapuro Galitam Tolam. It is the of the tree, Nigamakaldapuro, the tree of the Nigam of the Veda. If this is metaphorically speaking, there are many branches of knowledge. And Nigamakaldapuro Galitam Tolam. This Bhagavatam is not only the fruit, and not only the ripened fruit of the tree, the Vedic knowledge. Phalam means fruit, but Galita means like fallen. It's so ripe that it's fallen off the tree. So you don't even have to climb it or get on somebody's shoulders at any risk to acquire the fruit. You just come pick it up. In fact, it's been passed down. That's it by Sukadeva. Kalitambo. Sukamugadamata Drava Sangitam. Vibata Bhagavatam Rasam Malayam. Hora Hora Sikabudi Bhagavatam. So you should drink the fruit. So it has no pit, it has no peel. Just drink the fruit, and the consequence of that, or the result of that, may very well be that you pass out. That's what the verse says. And if you do, which is likely, what should you do? Get up and drink it again. So the point being here, it is also the Kavya. So it is the Shruti, it's the Veda, it is the Purana, it is the Kavya. So all three of the voices are there. Srimad Bhagavatam. I would get on to the Bhagavatam.
History of the
So for example, the Bhagavatam is not a historical book like we know, but it's trying to speak about the time of Krishna, the advent of Krishna, as experienced, as I said the other night, by the awesomeness trance. That's a good thing to listen to, as I was explaining the other night. Who do you want to listen to in terms of what is either the objective world or the subjective world? Someone who has control of their mind, who understands the mind, who's mastered the mind. It's reasonable, right? We may know something about the mind by neuroscience, something like that, or the science of the mind. These are disciplines in our times and so forth, which come up with very, very like flatland explanations if you will, of what is the mind, reducing it for the most part, or trying to the brain. I've talked about this before. It's an important subject. It's definitely a talk that you cannot walk. Nothing has, there's no meaning. The meaning is that we speak of God being an illusion, soul being an illusion, red is an illusion, blue is an illusion, sweet is an illusion. There are no qualitative things. These are all just illusions. There's only physical forces. This is the idea. This is the leading predominant philosophical perspective in the world today. But obviously, as I say often, it's a talk that nobody can walk. So it's useless. It's absolutely useless. And it's not. It's a thought. Materialism as a philosophy is a thought that says that thoughts don't matter. So I'm going to take a God's word. That thought doesn't matter. So the Bhagavatam, it's a different kind of history of sorts. It's an attempt to on the As to relate the experience of Krishna Lila. Then we come some 500 years ago, or many thousands of years from the time of the writing of the Bhagavatam to Chaitanya Lila, historical time, Chaitanya Bhagavat. It's as we have explained, if you go very deeply into Krishna Lila, you find yourself in Gaura Lila. So it's the continuation of the Bhagavatam. It's the lotus within the lotus of Goloka, right? Svetadvip. So Svetadvip, Lavadvip Gram. It's mentioned in Chaitanya Bhagavat. A place called Navadvip. That's also known as Svetadvip in Goloka. So the As, if you will, of Chaitanya Lila, Vrindavan Das Thakur, and the Chaitanya Bhagavat, he's trying to acquaint us with the feeling of the times, as is Krishna's Kaviraj Swami and Rari Gupta and Kavi Khanat, written about extensively about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and about their associates. We get a little bit of history. His father was such so and so. His mother was so and so. Maybe this was the lineage. Came from here, ended up here. Very little, really, comparatively, historical details compared to how we would write a historical text about some great person of our times, the way that we look at history. So, that long story short, we're short on historical details a little bit, but we know from, and we can look at different biographical texts and try to find the stories that appear in all of them, and we think, well, then that's probably more historically accurate. And that's not the most important thing, as I'm saying. You can change the story to make the point, to give the feeling. That's the idea. That liberty is there. For someone who has the feeling. What's the feeling of the verse? People want to, what does it literally say? What is it trying to do is the question. If it does that to somebody, then whatever he says or she says, it says, that's what it says. That's what it's, and the idea of the text is of the Bhagavatam, per se, or our Gaudiya text, is try to foster within us bhava. This is the goal of sadhana bhakti, to attain bhava, feeling, emotion. So that means that the text will affect within parameters of what is rasa tattva, different devotees in different ways, and that's very beautiful. Same verse, you can have the same verse will speak to some devotees in terms of Madhurya rasa, will also speak to someone else in terms of Sakya rasa. And new meanings come out that you haven't heard before. Of course, that's a problem. Because you write a book like that, with new meanings, feelings, even though they fit within Rasa Tattva, people won't take it too seriously. But if you could translate it into Bengali and pretend it was written 500 years ago, and give somebody else's name, and then we'll take it out and translate it literally. And lose a lot of it in doing that. That's a symptom of Kali. You know, if someone gives you a telescope to look at the stars and says, okay, now see, here's how it works. There's this big lens here, and then down here, there's a little one. So I want you to look through the little one. And you go, wait, no. I don't look through the big one. Then you just get a headache, right? You can see the stars. So there's Guru Parampara. It would be bigger than Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everybody's going a little smaller, it seems. Closer, smaller, but bigger. So bigger. As Krishna comes to us, that's as big as it gets. So with regard to any of the historical details, we know that Shiva Thakur was born in Bengal, let's say that it's called Bengal, Sayat, and when he was young, maybe about 12 or so, and he and his family moved to Navadvip along the bank of the Gaura. And he had a number of brothers, a pretty robust family, and they were also devotees. And Shiva Thakur married Malati Devi, of great spiritual stature as well. And the two, Malati and Srivas, they were Brahmins, the Brahmin caste, very religious, members of the Sankirtan and participants in the Yuga Dharma in a prominent way. Shiva Thakur would hold programs like Advaita would. And teach Bhagavad. Advaita was famous for teaching the Bhagavad and the Bhagavad Gita from a devotional angle of vision, where bhakti is seen, understood to be nirguna, whereas jnana is in sattva guna, and so forth. So Shiva Thakur was a luminary at those times, which have been described in all of the biographical texts, holy texts, sacred texts about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They were dark, the times were dark in their estimation, which is pretty much how it always seems. It's dark times that we live in. It doesn't get any darker. We really say that, and we objectively feel it, even though we know, well, the future is going to say, if only we were living back then, it would have been a lot easier. That's something, I guess, about the nature of the world we live in. So all of the texts describe people were not taking up the Yuga Dharma. Navadvip had become a place of Navanyaya, a new form of logic and punditry and sophistry, thank you. Sophistry and also the pursuit of material ideals and worship of the goddess, material acquisition, and so on and so forth. And so the devotees were few in number, and they band together as much as possible. And amongst them, as I say, Srivas and his good wife, they were very prominent members of that devotional community. And they were close with Jagannath Mishra and Sachidev. Lived nearby, they were close. And by the time that Chaitanya Dev appeared, as he's described, in the womb of Sachi, to bless the world. What is the verse? Sachi was in the
last line was
architecture in Sachi. I said anything. Sachi
Adaya Sri Adaya Sri Radha
Sachi Sindhu, depending from the ocean, Sindhu or Sachi's motherly love. What's already appeared. So by the time he appeared, Shivastapa was about 30 years old. So he was older, an elder. It's described in Chaitanya Charitamrita by Krishna's Kaviraj Swami that upon as the time approached, in the time beyond time, time after time, that's the, she's trying to get to it there, the spiritual world. Time after time, there's time there, but it's after time. It's a different type of time. And anyway, in that realm, when the time arose for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to appear, first the elders appeared, his gurus, his parents, so they all appeared as well. Srivastava was among them. So he has his origins, if you will, in or history, transcendental history, in Golok. Now, of course, we know that he's also identified with Nard, so we have to talk about that, because Nard is not per se a resident of Goloka Vrindavan. We'll touch on that subject, but when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared in the world, of course, for about some 20 or so years, he refrained from manifesting his Vaishnavism. And he was a Pandit and very attractive young man. And as I said before, really everybody loved him. He's very charming. But the Vaishnavas were upset with him because they thought he was such a good boy, had such good birth and good quality, but he's wasting his life, spending all his good karma. He'll be bankrupt in the next life. They would preach to him like that. Then he would say, I will become the best Vaishnava. Wait and see. And they would think, I'm so proud of this guy. This way he played with his associates, right? And of course, then, you know, he went to East Bengal. He was initiated there. He came back maddened with love of Krishna. And his condition was not understood by everyone. Even Sachi thought that her son was very, maybe had lost his mind. It was Srivas who came, I believe, and then examined the boy and understood that what he has attained is what we're all trying to attain. And so it began, right? The Sankirtan Lila of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This is the early beginning. Srivas is a very early and prominent member. He's been described in Chaitanya Charitamrita, where Krishna Kaviraj takes from Kavi Karnapur and from Swarup Damodar this idea of the Panchatattva, 5 truths, Panchatattvatmakam Krishna Bhakti Vasarupakam, Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakti Shaktikam. And this is, I believe, his own verse, which he concludes his Mangala Charan with. And he begins his Mangala Charan with a verse that similarly describes the 5. What is it? Tat Prakasham Sachak Chakti Krishna Chaitanya Samnakam. All 5 of those. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Godhead himself. This is Swami Bhagavan. Vande Guru Nisha Bhaktan. Isha Nisha Avatarakam. So, Tat Prakasham is the Shakti Krishna Chaitanya Samnakam. So we have Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, then his Prakash, which means his expansion of himself or lila in the Parvyom, in the spiritual world. Then you have his avatar, which means who descends into the world. That is Mahavishnu, the first avatar, first descent. And of course, that's way to the Prakashas, Nityananda Prabhu. These are the three Prabhus, right? Purushas. And then you have the two Shaktis, Gadadhar and Srivas, so the internal energy and the marginal energy. Srivas said to represent, really, in one sense, our prospect. The prospect of the jiva, unfettered by the influence of the Maya Shakti, becomes, as the implication, worshipable. That's a worshipable status. Not trying to be worshipped, but it ends up as such. So it's very encouraging to us in this regard. It can happen. Everyone, well, at any rate, so as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu manifests his Vaishnava Lila, his Sankirtan and so forth, Srivas Thakur is most probably well known for opening his house to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there are many nice stories in this connection. His house, his household, his whole family life was offered to, if you will, given to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. We as householders will make a room or a closet or something for Krishna in our house. Doesn't come out every now and then. But the house of Srivas Thakur, it was entirely given over in spirit to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Nothing, everything in that household moved around the pleasure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who would come there for his Pradosh Lila, evening Lila, and that would carry into the Nisha Lila, deep into the wee hours of the morning. There with his associates, he would perform his rasas and kirtan, kirtan rasa. And so it didn't matter what else was going on, everything would be shut down, the house is for this alone. And if there was anything in the house that in any way got in the way of that, he would drag, if it was a person, that person out by their hair, even if they were his own relative. And there are such stories. Mahaprabhu during his kirtan would say something is missing here, something we're not getting. The rasa is not coming. Because this was a closed door affair. He has not started his wheel of converting others yet. And so with a group really of his own eternal associates, realizing that's who they were and they were in another Leela, he was performing Sankirtan and tasting Bhakti Rasa. So because those were the parameters that were set up by him and arranged by very carefully with devotion by Srivas Thakur, that the conditions would be right and so forth, for Mahaprabhu to fully experience himself. If Mahaprabhu on one occasion said, something's not right, and he looked at someone is here who's not supposed to be, and I think he found inside the closet was one relative, old lady who hid herself there, wanted to see what was going on. There was a qualification to enter there. The other day we talked about what? Well, we talked about
faith.
The marketplace, yes, of the holy name. And the price to pay, only your faith. But Nityananda Prabhu has not yet arrived in Navadvip, and he's not selling. He's going to come a little later. Right? Then he will open the marketplace. Then that's his role. This is you got to understand. He is dying to do this. What do you think? I mean, what is Balaram's position? He can't directly participate in Krishna's romantic life. He's the older brother, so if he comes in, gopis will be a little respectful, have to tone it down and so forth. And Krishna as well. Now, of course, we know that Balaram sometimes reports on Krishna as he's as he charged to do by Yashoda. Watch out for him. And so one day, Krishna ate dirt while Ram's telling him. That did not go over well with Krishna. What kind of brother are you? Well, it's a real rift that they have. But this is his, the Vatsalya component of his Sakyaras, which is some cool. The Sakyaras is bundled together with Dasya and Vatsalya. And that Vatsalya is really played upon by Yasoda, who draws it out. But you're the older brother, 8 days older. So she's exaggerating. And of course, it's taken seriously for the reports. But notably, what? He knows about the gopis' love for Krishna. He's not telling about that. That means he approves of it. He approves of it. But he can't openly, probably, given the constraints of his rasa and the role that he has. But in Gaura Lila, now he can talk about it. Therefore, Vrindavan Das, in Chaitanya Bhagavad, you might be surprised to know, says that Nityananda Prabhu gave Madhurya Rasa to the world. He's in Satyaras. People say, you're in Satyaras, how can you give the Madhurya Rasa? One time, this Puja Pachita Maharaj, who, of course, knew Prabhupada very well, lived with Prabhupada for 6 years after the passing of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Prabhupada had two apartments in Calcutta. He lived in one, and the other he gave the Sridhar Maharaj. And they wrote their Bhagavad Gita commentaries at the same time. Prabhupada at that time said that he told us later that at that time he had wanted to start a movement with Sridhar Maharaj as the Acharya. That's how much regard he had for them. But Krishna had another idea in mind, such as the purity of Prabhupada. Not that Sridhar Maharaj wasn't pure also, but this is how he felt. So Krishna wanted to bring him, had a special role for him. Nityananda Prabhu in particular. So so Sridhar Maharaj, he knew Prabhupada personally. He told me that Prabhupada came to him and said he wanted to take sannyas, and he said, "I don't know, your wife will come here and your kids destroy my mouth if I do that." And he said, and you're just thinking about this now. It's a big thing, so you might want to let's just think about it a little bit. And he didn't wait for me. He went to Keshav Maharaj. So Sridhar Maharaj had given something else to Bhakti Prabhu and Keshav Maharaj. So we're all in the same family here. So he was, well acquainted with Prabhupada personally and his family and whatnot. And we were surprised sitting with him one day when he began to quote Prabhupada's poem on the Jaladuta that he had committed to memory. He's not writing for the public. He's writing a prayer to his Bhai, his friend, Krishna, and making a bargain with him. And in the context of that, asking for the power, the Shakti, to do the work of his guru, which obviously Krishna gave it to him in all certain terms. Therefore, Pujapachita should say, he is empowered, Nityananda Avesh, with the Avesh of Nityananda for wide scale circulation. But this is the characteristic of Nityananda Prabhu, right? The Otter has his characteristic and his contribution, he's the best. Advaita has his character and contribution, he's the best. Rupa Goswami is the best. Sanatana Goswami is the best. I remember once a godbrother of mine heard the pranam prayer that we sing in praise of Sridhar Maharaj. What does it say? The best of the disciples of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Lord, he took exception to that. You're singing a prayer. You're a disciple of Prabhupada. You're singing a prayer that says Sridhar Maharaj was the best of the disciples. How offensive. I said, well, here's another one. Here's one written by Sridhar Maharaj, written by Govinda Maharaj, and approved by Sridhar Maharaj in praise of Prabhupada. A prayer that was written by them because Prabhupada had asked Sridhar Maharaj to write a pranam for him. And in the prayer it says the Prabhupada is the best. There's more than one best. In that realm, they're all the best. There's no better or worse. There's no upper or lower. These are Sanatana Goswami very clearly explains in his Brihad Bhagavatamrita that these ideas of higher and lower, they all just pertain to this world, to motivate us. In the spiritual world, there's no sense of any, your love is better than my love. And everyone is fully, their subjective experiences, my love is the best. So that's an important point, because we risk turning this into like a football game or something like that. What's best? That's just our nature. So we should be careful not to allow that to happen with regard to the associates of Krishna. They are, without them, there is no Krishna. Without Yasoda, there is no Yashodananda. So what is that? This is a Veda, Chinta Veda, oneness and difference. Love of Krishna embodied in his devotees in different rasas is one and different from the object of their love, Krishna. You cannot have Krishna without love of Krishna. You cannot have love of Krishna without Krishna. You cannot have the teacher without students, right? So use an ordinary example to help us appreciate the point. So all these associates, then we seek their blessing. So anyway, Sridhar Maharaj had committed this to memory. We were surprised. Speaking about reciting Prophet's prayer, in which he expresses his ambition to herd cows with Krishna and so on and so forth. So, at any rate, we see in him some of the characteristics of Nityananda as well. And it's he, the Chaitanya Charya, just said, as I said, who Nityananda brought Madhurya Rasa to the world. In other words, the idea is he's like, Balaram's now got the chance to openly speak about Madhurya Rasa to everybody. You can't do that in Krishna Lila. So he's letting loose, really, really going for it, widely distributing. But before he arrives, which he arrived in, I think, must have been 1509 our time, on the Guru Purnim, which is in the Purnim, the full moon of July. The night before that, the day before that, he appeared, arrived in Navadvip. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's Leelas now, that's when it's complete. Everyone's can't be complete without Nityananda. He introduces into the devotees, he explains who he is to the devotees. He asks Srivas Thakur to say an appropriate verse. To sing an appropriate verse. What does he say? Parakidam Natabaratu Kanu Karnikara. You know? It's a gopi verse. Gopi speaking the verse, but it's speaking about Krishna, who's wearing the flowers over his ears. Those our flowers are placed on his ears by his friends. How they ornament him in the forest. And we were reading a little bit about this also this morning with regard to sometimes what the significance of that will be as a message from Radha to over his ear and so forth. The best of the dancers, right? And he's surrounded by his friends, singing his glory. Since you can see this verse is spoken by the gopis, but those sakas will say, "Yeah, they're saying the right thing over there." See, even they say this is the best. They wish they could go with us. They feel like this. So prior, anyway, the point is to Nityananda Prabhu appear, and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is not widely circulating. He is experimenting with the holy name. Prabhupada said in the beginning, I gave out the holy name to experiment with it, see what would happen to people. That's how we thought about it. And what had happened was they would respond and they would say, Prabhupada, I think we should have a temple in San Francisco. And Prabhupada said, let's do it. Krishna must be, that's how he ran his movement for the most part. Sometimes he was surprised. Once he said, I remember he said, it was a big disciple of his, stout fellow named Brahmananda, and we were in Los Angeles, and he started this dancing, like 1, 2 steps, and Prabhupada said, I thought that Brahmananda had to bob. And then I realized that it's not the bobs, but he would think like that. He was very, he thought, I've given Krishna, they're sincere, so Krishna will speak to me now how to run the movement. And we started temple Montreal. Okay, let's do it. And I remember one time on the train with Prabhupada, one disciple, the train stopped, and one disciple said, Prabhupada, there's no temple here. We should have a temple. And Prabhupada said, that's right, get off. Get off and start a temple. When my Gaura Tamal Krishna Maharaj Prabhupada was addressing some of the complaints about him from some of the temple presidents in North America, because he was canvassing widely to bring in new devotees, but in order to help him bring in new devotees, he would go to the temples on Sundays, and then he would give a talk for the Sunday. We used to have this Sunday love feast, right out of the 60s, and then he would tell the temple leaders, are there any of the guests who come who are regulars, so I might be able to take over the top, by speaking to them in person, make them into devotees, so that they would bring those people who they were grooming, to join the temple, and put them in the room, and then he pressed their emotional buttons and whatnot, and, and he would give the philosophy and so forth, and then they get a little excited, and he said, by the way, I have a party, and we're traveling on a bus around the country. It's the real romantic idea. It's just down the corner, so you can get your bags and meet, the bus down there. There's another Swami on the bus. And so then the temples became upset because he was like picking off all these ripe fruits, if you will, for the temple. They complained about it. It's a funny story now to think about it. But anyway, so at the time, then Prabhupada was concerned because they were all leaders in different capacities, whether it's sannyasi on a bus or the temple presidents, they were taking big responsibilities for Prabhupada. So Prabhupada was sympathetic with their complaints, right? And this was North America. So he decided, he was thinking about it, and he said he would change his service and take away his bus or something like that, give it something else. And then anyway, I don't forget the detail, but Tamal Krishna said, Prabhupada, I may as well go to China. And Prabhupada, Krishna spoke, and yes, you should go to China. They have no temples in China. And that's what he told them. They had him do. They had to go leave the whole party, the whole program that he had organized and so forth and so on. If it was really for service of Prabhupada, no problem, right? There's a story that Sridhar Maharaj used to tell of a disciple in Madras, the Madras Math or Gaudiya Math, was very, very dedicated. And when Saraswati Thakur came to visit the temple, the leader said, and so Das Brahmachari, he's organizing so many programs, he's serving so nicely. He said, bring him, I want to see him. So he brought him in, he said, I heard that you're doing this. He said, yes, by your grace, Guru Maharaj, by your grace, Guru Maharaj. He said, well, I want you to leave all that and go to Calcutta. Go and work in the kitchen there. He said, yes, Guru Maharaj. Okay. He said, no, you can stay here and do that. He was testing it to see if he was attached to serving his guru, or if he was attached to this, that, and the other thing, getting recognition for it, and so on and so forth. Some stories come to mind. So back to the theme. There you go. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu has arrived, and meanwhile, in the house of Srivas Thakur, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is experimenting with the holy name, like Prabhupada was, right? See what would happen. See who's here. See who. I mean, this is Krishna now in another lila, and he who is the object of love is in the position of a devotee of the love rather than the object. And so this is as I said before, this is lila is called, I believe it's called sadhana, sadhaka, siddha, sadhana, sadhaka, siddha, bhumi. The land, bhumi, where siddhas are playing the role of sadhakas. And they're playing it really well. So they don't know that they're siddhas. And then they see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Krishna. No, that can't be so. If he was Krishna, we're his associates. And then they see, we are his associates. We're another Lila. And they'll be covered by Yoga Maya. Answer to your question, remember you asked. We're covered by Yoga Maya. And they would think we are just humble devotees and so forth. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was just coming into now the Vaishnava central feature of this Leela and Sankirtan, and now he is having these closed kirtans in the house of Srivas Thakur, so not everybody can get in, right? That's waiting for Nityananda to come for wide dissemination. There'll be a little bit, it'll overflow because at Srivas's house, what did Kamsa do? Kamsa? Sure, you're talking about the right Leela, you remember? Who's Kamsa? Chand Kazi Kijai, the Chand Kazi, right, from the Muslim sector. He broke the Madanga, the house of Srivas. Right there, and then the ministers came. There'd be none of that. I mean, they were, they sound bad, but they were actually responding to the complaints of the Hindus. They were a little tolerant. The Hindus were complaining. That house of Srivas. They're constantly, all through the night. All through the night. And if you keep saying his name, it'll lose all its power. You're giving it to unqualified people. I mean, they're hearing it, we're hearing it. You know, of course, they don't let anybody in there. Who knows what they're really doing? But it's kind of this is the kind of complaints that were going on. They were so upset with Srivas Thakur that one Brahmin, tried to soil his reputation within his own circle, within the circle of the Vaishnavas, by putting at his doorstep the ingredients for Kali Puja and goat sacrifice. And so it looked like, while you guys weren't there at Kirtan, he sacrificed a goat, and you think he's a Vaishnava, but so this was very offensive. This was malicious intention, which is central to Vaishnava Aparad. So you don't be too neurotic about offending Vaishnava. We respect everyone for that matter. But Vaishnava Aparad really has its heart, has a malicious intent. Not some mistake, accidentally, something. So anyway, this was not very pleasing to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Srivas took it the other way. I said, see, I'm a low person, and he didn't try to defend himself really. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, what happened is that person developed leprosy. And then he met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and he asked her if he would cure him, because now, by that time, who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was, that he was extraordinary, was apparent, but he said, talk to Srivas. He defended my devotee. So his house, anyway, was the center of this experimentation for kirtan, and not anybody, just anybody could get in. We heard the other night that one Brahmin who was very pious, and his main claim to fame was that he ate, in terms of sustaining himself by foodstuffs, he only drank milk. Hints of milk. Otherwise, he was vegan. So, so he was but pure, right? And that's a good point. I mean, we shouldn't make ahimsa the central focus of our practice. It should be Sankirtan. And then Bhagavatam teaches reasonable ahimsa. So that's another subject, another topic to talk, but an interesting point. The Jains, they're always wearing masks. Right, that's forever, that's 24/7. But they don't create any insight. Their central thing is ahimsa. So we can't wear masks all the time. I respect those that are at this time. And, I did for quite a while myself too, but anyway, ultimately made the broadcast, right? From the same house. So at any rate, this was the house of Srivas. On one occasion, the kirtan was taking place, and on, going on, and Srivas Thakur's son died in the next room. And someone came in and pulled Srivas out of the kirtan and said, "His son has died." And just said, "Please, later. Sankirtan is going on here." But in his omniscience, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu could understand, the son had died, so he stopped the kirtan. Then said, "Bring in the son." Then he brought the son back to life. And the son spoke Vedanta philosophy. Imagine how the room was thrilled. So these are the kind of things that are happening in Srivas Thakur's house. Of course, while he made his house the altar for Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's sacrifice of Sankirtan, turned it into that, and everything that is revolved around that. He also had his own Vishnu altar, right? And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu sat on the altar at one point, right? In a moment of Aishvarya, and showed him this is the Mahaprakash, and it said, I think the kirtan went for 22 hours. It's a famous event, and it's mentioned in all the texts. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed himself to be Bhagwan. And different devotees who were coming from different leelas, like Murari Gupta, coming from Ram Leela. And Mahaprabhu said, "See me, I am Ram, and you are Hanuman." And he wrote Ram on his forehead. Tilak. Kolaveka Sridhara, and this one and that. It was a very extraordinary event. Otherwise, typically, when in the morning, of course, when the Sankirtan, the evening had finished, so that the day was starting again, Srivas Thakur would worship at the Vishnu altar. His deity was Bhagavan Narasimha, Sri Nrsimhadev. So it said on one occasion that he was worshiping Nrsimhadev, and he had the door locked, and he was meditating on his deity, and he was doing it right. So he was in a trance, serving the deity. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came and started banging on the door, making noise, broke his trance. Said, "What's going on? Who's it?" And he said, "Open the door. Who you're worshiping is standing here." And so he opened the door, and then he saw Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And in him, he experienced the bhava of the Shringa, seeing his eyes turn red and so forth. Amazing. He was astounded by this experience. And Mahaprabhu said, "Sing some verse in praise. This is the Nrsimhadev. I give a blessing. I'm here to bless. Say something, okay, blessing." So at that time, then Srivas Thakur, what do you say? Namutite bravo puse. He sang this verse. Nice verse. It's a significant voice for the verse that he sang. As I've said, Srivas Thakur is thought to be Narada Muni and Gaura Lila, right? Hmm. Narada Muni is in Sakirasa, and he has a tinge of Priti or Dasya also. But he's not a worshiper of lover of Krishna in Braj. He tends to be more prominent in, say, Dwarka, like where you'll find in the Nitya Lila, Arjuna, and so forth. And his Istadeva is Krishna, not Narasimhadeva. But here we find Srila Thakur is Nard, and he's worshipping Narasimhadev, and his deity is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishna, at the same time. So the verse, I say, is significant because the verse that he chose to sing, really kind of spontaneously, it came from him. Now you can imagine, the Shringadev is standing before you and saying, sing the verse. What verse are you going to sing? Well, he sang the first verse of Brahma's prayers from the Brahma Vimohanlila, which is just right in the center of the Sakirasa circle or center of the Bhagavatam. Namudyate unto you, I offer my respects. Babuse Tadabra Tadit, whose vapu, whose form is abra, like the rain cloud in color, wrapped Taditi, like in silver electric lightning, colored cloth, the two contrasting. He describes him in this way. And when Brahma says this, of course, he's very smart. So he's got the four heads, and he's thinking, okay, this is I should explain. This is Krishna, who now is standing before Brahma after having revealed that he is the source of everything, showing many universes and many other Brahmas and so forth, and many other forms of Narayan, all emanating from him. Brahma saw this. His heads are like spinning round and round, and all of a sudden, Krishna collapses the whole thing, and there he's just standing in the forest, like looks at him like, "What's a four-headed guy doing here? Where are you from?" Like that. He doesn't say anything. Krishna doesn't speak a word, and Brahma speaks like 30 some prayers, and he's wondering as he speaks with one mouth and with one mind, with his other three minds, what Krishna's thinking. How's he reacting to this? And so it's built in to each line that he's speaking. He's trying to, maybe you're thinking this, add that, and so forth. So he begins this beautiful description of Krishna, who now is standing before him as the perfect object of his love. Because at the dawn of creation, when Krishna enlightened Brahma, at that time it's mentioned that Brahma desired to have a relationship with him in Sakirasa. It's right in the text in Sanskrit. Krishna agreed. But it took some time for Krishna to further reveal esoteric significance of this. So one of the things that you in time you become acquainted with, what is the Ashraya Lambana? What is the Vishraya Lambana? What is the Udipana? What is the Satvika Bhav? What is the Anubhav? What were all these terms and so on? These are all elemental constituents, right, of rasa. So the Vishaya Lambana is the object of love. In this case, Krishna as a cowherd, and he's in the midst of his friends, who are all examples of the Ashraya Lambana, the shelter of the love, the personifications of the love. Again, are one and different object. And so from the vantage point of these sattkas, Krishna looks a certain way. Certain things that means to say will stand out for them, certain qualities of theirs, and so forth. From his mother's point of view, the other qualities will stand out and be prominent. From the gopis' point of view, other qualities and so forth. So there he is, And Brahma is seeing the form that fully corresponds with the kind of love that he is really in pursuit of. What it all means. He got initiated and he didn't quite know what was happening. That's pretty common. It takes a while to figure that out. That's the whole going through the whole stages of sadhana bhakti. And then, as I said the other night, when you're entering into bhava bhakti, the sambandha, this type of knowledge is realized. So now your bhakti is fully informed. Now it's theoretically informed as much as we have sambandha gyan. And also sometimes we get the sambandha agyan. We got it confused. So we need good teachers to help us get it right and so forth. And the right conceptual orientation that we have is going to foster a certain type of action, which is going to have a certain result. So sambandha abhidaya prayojana, right? So now he's seen the object of his love as he appears in the forest with the cows and cowherd voice. And he says, there you stand before me with a beautiful complexion, like the rain cloud, and wrapped in like lightning yellow cloth. It's very attractive. And he thinks, yes, but Narayan also looks like that. And one of the things that Brahma is establishing here, of course, or it's being established by Krishna through Brahma, is that Krishna is the source of Narayan. So what is the measure now of Brahma's sambandha gyan? So he says, this is your beautiful, but he thinks, well, but that could be said about Narayan. So then he says, but Gunjavatam, so what is it? Gunjavatam,
Paripicha.
the Sanmukaya. Yeah. So he says, oh, but that your beautiful mukha, the Sanmukaya, your beautiful face, your face is beautified by the ornaments, the rustic ornaments that you are wearing, which the implication is Narayan doesn't wear. And what is that? He has the Gunjamala necklace, right? He has for his crown the peacock feather. Bless me. This is his crown. Narayan does not wear a peacock feather. He's an Aishvarya. Krishna wears the peacock feather. It has eyes and it's beautiful. The eyes represent knowledge and the beauty represents the heart. So Krishna's, because the eyes of the peacock really don't see. He sees with his heart. It's like mother saw her blind child and named him Padmalocha, lotus eyes. This is real knowing, right? Lotus eyes. So this way he describes Krishna and distinguishes him from Narayan. He speaks about how he's ornamented, and the implication is, of course, that these ornamentations for Krishna cowherding, these are arranged by his Narmasakas before he goes out cowherding every day. That's one of their blissful services. He's dressed at different times in different ways, but after the meal and a little rest, it's time to go. Then this is the Narmasakas task, and they dress themselves the same way. Dressed in, they dress themselves the same way. And if you're that fortunate, then Subal will come to give him this pearl garland, this pearl necklace. The secret is when you put this on him, then he will be able to look down and look at the pearls and see the reflection of Radha in them without anyone knowing in the public sphere that he's looking at it. That's their service. So the way in which Brahma describes him, as I say, distinguishes him from Narayan. What's the third line there? It says, oh yeah, and then he's got. So he said he's got his stick, cowherding stick in one hand, right hand. In his left hand, Kabbalah, he has the fruit and yogurt. What does he mean by he's two-handed? He's not four-handed. He's different. And not only that, but he's got in his left hand, he's got the yogurt and fruit, and it's coming from somebody else's mouth. I mean, it's peculiar. One of his friends' mouth. Passed it on. This is great. Taste it. Right? Such as their intimacy. And he's got his Venu tucked in his belt and his horn and all these things. The last line.
Lakshma Shri Mridupadi Pashupam Vajana.
Yeah, and he's very beautiful, and his feet are very tender, soft at this age. He's doesn't weigh enough to make footprints in the forest. So this way. Very nice verse describing the object of love for Sakirasa. And this is a verse that Srivas Thakur is singing when Sringadev asked him to offer something in praise. So it says something about Srivas's internal absorption. And of course, as I said, Narada doesn't have Nrsimhadev as his Ishtadeva, he has Krishna. But Narada is, of course, the expansion of Madhu Mangal, who is the Brahmin Krishna Lila in Ragmarg, and he worships Nrsimhadev in the house of Nanda Maharaj. He's been adopted there. In Gopal Champu, it's described by Jiva Swami that prior to Krishna's birth, all of Braj was very happy. Nanda Maharaj had become the king. Was passed on to his elder brother. The first act as a king that Upananda performed was to pass the crown to Nanda Maharaj. He was so qualified, and everyone was so satisfied living in Nanda's kingdom. But there was one problem, and it became more and more prominent as time went on, and that was that Nanda did not have a son. So who would be the heir? So unbeknownst to them, they were elder. It's a long story how they ended up resolving that problem, Nanda and Yasoda. But of course, it wasn't known to everybody that Yasoda was pregnant. But in the village, a mystical lady appeared with a young lad. And they said, "You look like the Veda herself, or you look like Yogamaya." She said, "My name is Purnamasi. And my son is Sandipani Muni. This is my grandson. He's just like Narada." He said, "He's a student of Narada." Yes, he looks kind of like Narada. He's a perfect Brahmin. And she said, and then they thought, "Oh, you are so auspicious that you came here to bless us. It's so wonderful. Let us make a house for you near the Krishna." The Krishna is another name for the Jamuna, which means dark, because the waters are dark. She said, "Oh, it's as if the Veda has spoken. Place me near Krishna. You think that I'm special, but I want to tell you, your place is special. And I've come because Yashoda is pregnant. Soon there will be a child." Oh, so this was celebrated. They built her a thatched hut and so forth. She said, "This I always appear like this, and this boy always appears like this. We never age." Now, from the Lila point of view, the feeling of it, we'll say, well, he's like Narada. He's a student of Narada. But the tattva implication of it is that just as Krishna expands himself for different Leelas, like in Mathura and Dwarka with different devotees, so his primal associates expand along with him. So the Vaidhi Marg expansion of Madhu Mangal, Sakirasa and Ragmarg, that is Narada Mangal. And in time, after Krishna was born and grew up to a certain point, Purnamasi hands Madhu Mangal over to Krishna. It's very touching. They become fast friends, and he adopts him, and he lives in the house of Krishna in Nandakran there. And he's a Brahmin, although he's he's a fully Sakyas, he's a Narmasaka, and he's a Narmasaka, but he's a Vidusaka, which is interesting combination. But he's adopted, and because he's a Brahmin, he becomes the Pujari in the house of Nanda Maharaj and worships Nrsimhadev, which Srivas Thakur is doing and revealing to us by the verse that he chose. What's on his mind? What's on his mind? Later, as I said, when Nityananda Guru came to Navadvip, the Mahaprabhu said, Srivas, chant an appropriate verse. He's saying this verse from Bhagavatam, but he's cited earlier, describing Krishna with his friends and so on and so forth, right? With the flowers over his ears that they're putting there, and so on. 3 different places in Gopal Champu, Jiva Swami mentions. He has the nature of Narada. So we say it one way, you see, for lila. But if we look at the tattva, well, actually Narada is coming out of Manamangal as a partial explanation. Now Narada is stressed in relation to Srivas overtly. This is a kind of a covert and esoteric, looking a little deeper beneath the surface explanation. But Narada is stressed because, why? Because Narada is the paradigmatic figure who is an example of sadhana box, sadhana siddha, sadhana, of a sadhana siddha, who become perfect by sadhana. 2 lives of Narada are described in the Bhagavatam. One, his life as a Gandharva, where he came in touch with the Sankirtan. Gandharvas are very musical. So here comes clank, 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 kirtan along with that, and then what those guys, the world of key or something like that. That was not good, but there was some good to it. So he had to take birth from the Gandharva Loka on earth as the son of the maidservant. He didn't know who his father was, and so on and so forth. But then the good part came, the good result is that some Bhakti Vedantas traveling during the rainy season, they became pulled up in the house of his mother, and they shared with the boy their Bhagavad Gita. And after they left, his mother died from a snake bite. And all that tattva went in his head. And so for the cremation, he burnt the house and everything, walked off, following the Bhagavad tattva, the implication. In that life. And he tells his story in the 5th chapter, I think 5th and 6th chapter of the first canto of Bhagavatam. It's very compelling. Step by step, he went through. So Srivas as the Tasta Shakti, Sadhana Siddha, we prominent this identification with Narada, for suchす. Right? But looking deeper, then they say, well, it must be Narada's Madhamangal. Srivas must be in the Braj Lila as well. So some thoughts. Thakur ki jai. Mani ki jai. Word from any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
That last description you gave, did you say that Narada Muni? I mean, he cremated his mom as well as the house.
Yeah, that's what the idea. For the cremation, he burnt the whole house down. And went and became a mendicant. Because he understood this is what life happens in life. You get attached to a mother and a house and everything, and it all just goes up in smoke. So I'm going to put it in smoke and I'm going to walk off. This is what he did. I should say that, to come back to Srivas, it's the central place that where we learn the most about Srivas Thakur. It seems quite appropriate then. That place where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu chose to perform his internal rasa kirtan and is eternally doing so in his Nisha and Pradosh Leelas. That place. Oh, Shri Vas. Shri means Radha. Vas means residence. So in his heart, Radha resides. So it seems appropriate, given that what's happening there is the Sankirtan taking the Gaur Leela associates into the Rag Marg of the Braj Leela. That the courtyard, which is a manifestation, if you will, of the heart of Shiva Thakur, is identified with Priyanarma Saka, like Madhu Mangal, because this Sakya Rasa, as we said earlier, has a very big role in disseminating this Madhurya Rasa. Nityananda Prabhu, what did he do? How widely he circulated that. You look at Prabhupada Vatamrita, the two cantos who are the chief protagonists. They're Sakya Rasa devotees. What they're doing, they're pointing to the virtues of Madhurya Rasa in both cantos. It goes on, we go on and on. There's so many examples of this. Very nice, supportive role, if you will, of Sakya Rasa. So the courtyard of Srivas is the heart of Madhumangala. Seems appropriate. Madhumangala. Yes.
I'm wondering, is there, I mean, when Krishna leaves Vrindavan, goes to Sandipani Muni's ashram.
Yes.
Seems like I would remember his friend and his dealings with Purnamasi and Madhu Mangal because of that connection.
Might remember them?
Well, I mean, is there any mention of his connection with Madhu Mangal and Purnamasi and Sandipani Muni?
Well, when Krishna goes to Mathura, then Vasudev convinces Nanda Maharaj that his son needs an education. So he sends him to Avantipur, where he's going to be in Balaram, be educated in the Gurukul by Sandipani Muni. But Krishna sends Madhu Mangal and other friends back to Vrindavan. So, what's your question?
I don't know. It just seems strange in the sense that Sandipani Muni is elsewhere, but then if his son is Madhu Mangal.
Well, his son left there and came with Purnamasi to Vrindavan because she has a role there and he has a role there. Now, this is the Bhagavatam. If you look at the Madhava Goswami, 2 dramas in must be Rita Madhava, then the narrative of the Leela is different than the Bhagavatam. Vishnu Chakravarti says he's talking about how the Leela plays out in another kalpa, in another universe, than it played out here. There you can find Madhu Mangal goes to Dwarka with Krishna. You like that part? Yeah, there also. So there are different possibilities. Yes.
My question is, so you gave the pastimes of, the kirtans and Srivasa's home. This is happening in Navadvip. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then goes to Jagannath Puri, Srivas, does he just stay in Navadvip, or do the devotees follow Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Jagannath Puri?
Well, there's a few that follow him, and they don't have families, so they can follow him. Gadadhar, Nityananda, Jagadananda, needs a cook, Mukunda, Kirtaniya. There are different descriptions who the small group was, but those are usually included. Shivas is married, so he has a house, family, and so forth, so he can't go. But as Sachi said, that there's a lot of commerce between Puri and Navadvip. It's like another room in the same house. So if Chaitanya Dev goes there, my son Vishwambar goes there, great Shri Krishna Chaitanya, then we'll hear news about him. And devotees are always coming and going. And one of the big events, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, of course, is the Rath Yatra annual event. So many devotees from Bengal we'll go to Navadu, go to Jagannath Puri for the Ratha Yatra. So Srivas and all men and their wives, so many of them go annually, led by Shivananda Singh, to Jagannath Puri. And then they get there and be hosted and whatnot, and they would stay there for as long as 4 months. This is the rainy season is beginning in July. And then they will return. So he spent some time there to help.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a different lila. We're going to talk about that tomorrow. It's different from Navadvip. Because it's something that's important for us, but hopefully you'll attend tomorrow. What else? Yes.
You mentioned that the Chankazi is Kamsa. Where did you hear that? Just curious. Is
It's been around for
the
a while.
same?
It's in the ether.
What?
It's in the ether.
Okay. Oh, I see.
I don't know if it's mentioned for the tradition. It's certainly there in the oral tradition. Yes.
Lord Maharaj, I was wondering about Srivasa's humility, the psychology behind when he gets that Kali Puja paraphernalia left outside his house.
Could you repeat the question?
About the humility of Srivas Thakur when he gets the meat and wine and whatnot left outside, and he disowns that, or he owns that. I don't quite understand how that psychology works. If there's a possibility even to explain it.
Well, people may want to criticize you and defame you. It's probably good not to get plugged into that. Because there's no difference between praise and criticism. Try that on. So don't plug into that. You don't get plugged into that. Then it goes away. That'll be the best thing for that person to. Otherwise, it just perpetuates. So he sets a good example. Okay, well, nice to be with all of you. Very good audience. Hoping session tomorrow, we hope to see you there. Shiva Thakur ki jai, Mahaprabhu ki jai, Jai Chand ki jai, Guru Vaishnava Guru Parampara ki jai, Om Premanande,
Haribo! Thank you, Kali Pavana, for your
Thank you all
translating.
for coming. The dessert took longer to cook than we expected, so